You're probably here to better understand why Arsenal versus Newcastle ended in a draw, a tactical stalemate between Mikel Arteta and Eddie Howe. So let's break it down, shall we? Bringing you straight in to the tactical board on screen, you can see Arsenal on the left and Newcastle on the right. This is how both teams lined up on paper. However, as the game went on, things did change quite a lot. So looking at Arsenal, because let's be honest, they had 67% possession and 17 shots. Newcastle very much set up to hurt Arsenal on the counter-attack. Although at a later part in today's video, we will look at the chances few and far between that Newcastle did have. So when Newcastle were defending against Arsenal, they were very much set up in this 4-5-1 formation. We saw Eddie Nketiah operating between these lines, not much space for him to operate in because there were really 5 players surrounding him when we've got Gabriel here, Willock, Longstaff, Schär and Botman. So very, very difficult for him to operate. We saw Odegaard at times sort of playing just off of Willock or inside this space here. Saka on the right-hand side, Martinelli on the left, and Xhaka at times playing slightly deeper compared to where we normally see him in this role. Although throughout the game, this did change, especially in the second half when Arsenal were on top. Now, we did see Thomas Partey take up that usual anchor-like position at the base of midfield with Saliba and Gabriel just behind him. And in previous games against teams that I suppose Arsenal have dominated in, where we've scored 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 goals, we've seen Zinchenko and White in this 3, more of a narrow 3, and where we've really significantly dominated, where Arsenal have seen opportunities to exploit teams. We've even seen Ben White often getting on this overlap, making a front 6 at times. But we didn't see Arsenal in this usual sort of 3 in midfield to begin with, at least, especially in that first half. We saw Arsenal very much as a wide 3 in midfield. Now, the reason for this is Saliba and Gabriel were playing just off to the side of Partey for a change. Now, the reason for this was Wilson was tasked with essentially keeping Partey occupied. So every single time he got the ball, we've seen in the past that Partey will come out to the left and spray long balls to Martinelli, for example, or over to the right and spray wrong balls to Saka, for example. But he was on Partey the whole time. And it made it very, very, very difficult. When it wasn't Wilson that was on Partey, we saw Wilson here occupying this space, and we see Gabriel come out to Thomas Partey. Again, not allowing him to make those balls in here to Odegaard or Xhaka. And the reason for that is Longstaff would be really willing to close the ball down if the ball was passed to Gabriel, because we know that Arsenal like to play side-to-side, possession-based football. We see the ball go out to the left to Zinchenko or Tierney in previous games, and then out to these wings where we know we can hurt teams with the likes of Martinelli and Saka. And on this side, it was Willock who was tasked with sort of closing down Saliba, if you will, if Partey came here with a pass. And it made it really difficult because it was essentially at times 4 versus 3 for Arsenal. And it was an area that maybe Arteta looked to exploit, because when we did press, if it was on this left-hand side, there were gaps here for Granit Xhaka to operate in, and vice versa. If Willock was to press, there were spaces here for Odegaard to operate in. But where Arsenal found it really, really difficult, especially in the wide areas, which is, as I already mentioned, an area that Arsenal typically tend to really hurt teams, Trippier and Almiron were doubling up essentially on Martinelli. And if there were spaces for the likes of Schär, if Almiron was caught out of position, what we would see here is Trippier to come over to mark Martinelli. We'd see Longstaff coming in here to double up, or coming in here to help Xhaka, or Schär to come across. So it made it very, very difficult for Arsenal to play out wide. And I think that is one of the reasons why we did see Zinchenko and Ben White play significantly wider than we usually do, to try and make those numbers up out wide and try and use wide rotations and to get in and around the back, which we saw several times, especially from the right-hand side, to get behind Newcastle. And it's very much the case here as well. Saka did try to isolate Burn many times. He's not a natural left back. We saw Joelinton doubling up on Saka. He's a massive danger man for Arsenal. And when Odegaard did burst into these spaces, we did see Willock come in here and cover that. And that's another reason why we saw our wide fullbacks play as wide as they do, because White could get in behind Joelinton covering, White, Willock covering as well. And another reason why we didn't see them in an advanced position as much as we usually do is because Joelinton sometimes would stay high and wide. Likewise with Almiron on the right, looking to hit Arsenal on the counter-attack. Willock would come in and cover if Joelinton was looking to press high and make it very difficult. And that was a theme throughout the game. In the second half, however, things did change. We did see Tomiyasu come on for Ben White, and we did see Tomiyasu come in here and Zinchenko making up those numbers in midfield as Arsenal pressed to make it really difficult for Newcastle. And this is highlighted, that shape that I told you about, that 4-5-1. It was something that we saw throughout the game. Newcastle did not change from the tactics. It was a clear message from Eddie Howe. And this is shown in a picture that I have in a later part of today's video. Now, how did Newcastle set up when they did attack Arsenal, I hear you ask? Let's get Arsenal back into position and we'll have a quick look at how Arsenal defended in that typical 4-4-2. Occasionally, we did see a 4-1-4-1 with Odegaard in here, but Newcastle very much set on that counter-attack. We saw Joelinton out here on this left-hand side. They did try to overload on the right with Trippier and Almiron, maybe looking to exploit Zinchenko, not known for his defensive capabilities, although he did a fantastic job. And then we saw the likes of Gabriel, Longstaff, and Willock just in behind, occupying that space, looking to open up spaces between the lines. And we saw Botman, Shearer, and Burn, who's more of a centre-back, play this system here just to make it a little bit more difficult for Arsenal to hit Newcastle on the counter-attack. But we didn't really see that too much. A lot of what Newcastle did in possession from an attacking aspect came in the early stages of the first half and the second half. But beyond that, Arsenal really did dominate the game, head and shoulders above Newcastle. And credit where credit's due, Newcastle are over 8 hours now without conceding a goal, and you can certainly see why. A very stubborn side when defending. But let's have a quick look to try and sort of back up some of the things that I've just said. Here are the average positions of both teams. We can see here that there are only 4 players, outfield players that is, for Arsenal on the left-hand side in Arsenal's half. The rest of Arsenal's 11 are in the opposition half. So it just goes to show how much of our possession was in the opposition half. And we can see here in the action areas, 33% of that was in the centre of the park, and the remaining 33% in the opposition third. No surprise whatsoever to see Martinelli and Saka, the 2 furthest players forward for Arsenal. We can see here Zinchenko coming slightly inside, doubling up in that left half space with Granit Xhaka. I did half expect to see him further wide, if I'm honest with you. But as mentioned from the tactical board, we did see him come inside, making those numbers up in midfield with Thomas Partey playing a 2-2-5 at times, or a 2-2-6, if you will. So Ben White on the other side playing a much deeper role at right back. In previous weeks, from previous tactical analysis videos that I've brought to you on this channel, we've seen him in a slightly more advanced position. He's been allowed that freedom due to the opposition, with all due respect. Comparing this to Newcastle, on the other hand, we can see there that front three of Wilson, Joelinton and Almiron. Just next to Almiron, we can see Kieran Trippier. We know how much of a threat he can be. He's been one of the best right backs, best fullbacks in the league this year. And then that midfield three of Joe Willock, Gabriel, and Longstaff there in the centre, making it really difficult, really compact as well for Arsenal. Now, as mentioned on the tactical board, there was a fantastic picture that I picked up from the game itself that really does highlight how Newcastle were set up with that 4 at the back. You can see there with that initial yellow line across the screen, and that midfield 5, which made it really difficult for Arsenal. Now, on the ball, in this particular picture, we can see Gabriel, and I've used some lines there to show you how difficult it was for them to pick passes. It was very much a game of left to right, looking slowly to open Newcastle up. And that red line that you can see between the two yellow lines is that typical front five that we've seen from Arsenal all season that has been so effective at not only breaking down teams, but scoring plenty of goals in the process. But it was very much, this basically sums up the game from a tactical point of view. It felt like this for 90 plus minutes. Now, there is one thing that I do want to end the video with today. Two key talking points, two key incidents from the game. Arteta was quizzed and brought it up in his post-match interview. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. These two incidents on screen. On the left was the first. There was a pull on Gabriel's shirt, clear as day in my opinion, from Dan Burn, reviewed by VAR and not given. And then very late on in the game, 90 plus minutes on the right-hand side, there was an appeal for handball. Granit Xhaka looking to get the ball across the box. It was at close range. So for me, this one, it's a little bit more, where is football going if it's given? But I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Were these penalties? Were they not penalties? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. If you have enjoyed today's video, do go ahead and smash that like button. If you are new around here, do please consider subscribing. I am looking to increase my subscriber base. But thank you very much for watching. I'm Jake, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe and take care.